When I do something, I don't entertain the negative components or the consequences. I only think about the positive, which I think is an asset and also a liability, because it gives me the courage to move forward to do that. And it also prevents me from the negative outcomes that prevent a lot of people from moving forward or taking that initial step. Where it's a liability is I don't look at the kind of impact that it might have on the team and the stress it can cause for other people, because I always think it's going to work, because I'm that person who's like, I have an idea, I'm going to go for this thing, everybody. And even if I fail, I don't record it as failure. I just look at it like, here's another way that didn't work. I'm going to find another way that's going to work.
Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
Today, you, Christo, you're known across the world as the founder of The Futur, this online business education company that has helped teach 1 billion people, and in continuation of helping them make a living doing what they love without losing their soul. We know all about your YouTube channel and its 2 million subscribers and your podcast. But that is so not what this episode is about. What this episode is about is how you walked away from Blind, an $80 million brainchild of yours, a motion graphics company, and also how you became The Futur with the help of the how and the who that was behind it, passed away just celebrating his anniversary of his death on August 21st. After going through a lot of research and reading and watching his interviews, what he said was that it doesn't occur to you whatsoever that you can fail and that you just don't overthink things. So I'm curious if he thought and you thought you couldn't fail. Why did you decide to hire a coach?
Oh, very good. 2 parts to this. When I do something, I don't entertain the negative components or the consequences. I only think about the positive, which I think is an asset and also a liability, because it gives me the courage to move forward to do that. And it also prevents me from the negative outcomes that prevent a lot of people from moving forward or taking that initial step. Where it's a liability is I don't look at the kind of impact that it might have on the team and the stress it can cause for other people, because I always think it's going to work. And it also creates a situation where and it's unfair for my wife to always be having to think about, like, how might this fail? Or my head of business, Amy, who always like, Chris, but if you do this, then you can't do that. And they're always moving the chairs on the deck around, because I'm that person who's like, I have an idea, I'm going to go for this thing, everybody. And everybody's like, oh, okay, here goes another thing he's going to try. And even if I fail, I don't record it as failure. I just look at it like, here's another way that didn't work. I'm going to find another way that's going to work. And so, yeah, I think Keir pointed that out to me because I just do it instinctively. And he's like, the reason why you do what you do is because I don't think you've had much failure in your life. And he wasn't giving it to me as a compliment. He was reminding me to remember that regular people fail, have had this taste in their mouth, and to demonstrate compassion and empathy for those people and try to help them along the way. So there's lots to unpack there. Now, why would I hire a business coach? Because not realizing that you can fail is not the same thing as saying I cannot be helped. 2 very different concepts there. And I'll pause there.
I want to also just go back, because what you said is it doesn't occur to you to fail because you're a bit of a cliff jumper, right? And I am too. I'm somewhat ridiculously fearless in that way, but that doesn't mean that, oh, by the way, there's no fire down below. And I think that what you're saying here is that as somebody who is a tireless teacher and is very experimental and is constantly trying things, that's just part of the nature of you. And what it sounds like from what you said is that you could keep going, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're always going in the right direction. And it can exhaust people around you. You mentioned your wife, because it can be hard to be, always troubleshooting those questions or ideas, as you put them. But the second piece that you just talked about was there's still more, right? Just because you can't fail doesn't mean that there isn't an upside to how you could be doing it. So please continue.
Yes. And I want to clarify something. I think I can fail a lot in physical endeavors. Like if you were like, Chris, go summit Mount Kilimanjaro or Everest, I'm like, I might fail. I could die. I could lose limbs. That's not something I'm ready for. Let's go skydiving, Chris. I'm like, no, the chute could not open. I could fail. And I worry about that. I can fail as a husband. I can fail as a father. I can fail my personal relationships. So I just want to make sure everybody understands, like, in terms of like my business endeavors, my artistic pursuits, I don't think there's such a thing as failure. And that's what pushes or propels me forward. Now, if I want to do something, which there's many things I want to do, I realize that I can get there. And it's a question of time, money, and resources. But if I want to get there faster, what I do is I've already learned this lesson, is you spend money to lessen the amount of friction and pain that you're going to experience. Let's take it to a level which everybody can understand. In America, you go to high school, and that's kind of the end of your requirement to study. After that, you can do whatever you want. You can actually even fail out of high school if you want and not continue on. And then what we do is we elect to pay money to go to college, university, in my case, a private art school, so I can learn something. You could say that, well, you could have learned that on your own. It could have taken you 10 years. There's many different ways of doing that, but that's the path I chose. I chose to pay the tuition, to go to a 4-year private art school, to learn what it is I need to learn. And those are, like, again, two independent ideas. There's some overlap, but they're not mutually exclusive. Like, you can do both. You can fail in school, you can fail in paying to learn, in every combination thereof.
So are you suggesting that the reason why you chose Keir was so that you could get there faster?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. There are many other reasons. I didn't know what I didn't know. And you probably have heard me say this before, is entrepreneurship is a pretty lonely endeavor. There's your partner in life, in this case, my wife, who isn't in the day-to-day grind with me at this point. And so she has opinions about lots of things. And neither of us are business people. We went to art school together. And it's kind of like the dumb leading the deaf. It's like, what are we doing? I don't know. We're just making our best guesses at everything. How to bid, how to get on a conference call, how to pitch and win, how to pitch and lose. We don't know what we don't know. So when I heard about the concept of a business coach, I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Let's try. And it happened to be that we were in a good financial situation at that point, where we upgraded lots of things, hired a CPA, hired a financial advisor, hired a business coach, all in the same year. And so that was a year of spending, but also in receiving as well. And I want to know what I don't know. And I want to be able to talk to another person who has seen more, who has done more, where I can say, I'm thinking about this concept, or I want to hire this person. Am I making the right decision? That takes away a lot of anxiety. So know you can speak to someone who has the experience, who's trained to speak to you and give you sound counsel. And that's why I hired the business coach.
I love what you said about receiving, right? That you're not just spending the money, you're receiving something in return. And so what I would love to understand is, what specifically, if you had to pick out a couple of things, did you receive and or learn from Keir, and what do you think that you are applying most today?
I can go down the list of things. So we'll go, and I'll stop when you're like, okay, that's enough. Because there could be many days worth of conversation here in terms of what I learned from Keir. The first time that I met Keir, he saved me from making a horrific business decision. And I learned some very important things. So I was telling him about a business venture that I was about 9/10 of the way through. We're at the contract stage where I need to sign in that it's official. And I don't mean to use the word partner in a colloquial sense. It's like literally we are partners. We own a company together. We share in profit and there's equity ownership and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very complicated legal structure. And I was telling him about it, and he said, through a series of questions, is this really what you want to do? There are easier ways to make money that have better guarantees that bring you zero stress. And so he drew it to focus, like, what the heck am I doing? What I learned from that conversation with him is, number one, if you want to coach somebody, just ask them questions about what they want and make sure that their answers align with their overall belief system, which clearly it did not. Number two is that as committed as you are emotionally to something, it's never too late to change your mind. And he gave me permission to change my mind, to go against my word, because I had said to this person, let's go in business together. And we're kind of at the chapel, and we're about to say our vows, and to say, like, you know what? I have cold feet, I have to exit, versus the momentum of that moment pulling you in. And so in that one conversation, he saved me from a disastrous business decision. He allowed me to think clearer. He gave me permission to change my mind. And he taught me what a coach does, which is to ask really great questions. And really, in a very efficient way, he only asked me 3 questions, taught me, like, this is what it means to be a coach. And that was just our very first meeting.
Wow. I love this also because when I had the great fortune of meeting with you in London, you said, the reason why people hire coaches is because they buy themselves some objectivity. And having somebody who is surrounding you, who's not in it, and clearly has less emotional attachment, allows them to see things, ask deliberate questions, and then, of course, you have new answers. So that's awesome. And as either that example or a different example, in your day-to-day life, like, are you thinking to yourself, oh, here's, like Keir taught me this, or Keir gave this to me, and now, this is a top of mind thing. Now I own this information and I get to apply it. And what might that be?
I am the byproduct of many teachers and mentors and coaches. Some are related to me, some I work with on a professional level, but I carry those lessons with me. And I think of myself as a really good student. So the first part of being a good student is being a great listener and making sure you understand and process the lesson as it was taught to you. And I think I've done that. And it was affirmed to me on several occasions where Keir said, you are the best student I have, and I don't blow smoke up your butt. And the first time he said it, I was thinking, sure, I'm sure you say this to all of your clients. And I just smiled and said, thank you. But he kept saying, because he could read my face, not on the same day, but on different occasions. And then one time I asked him, Keir, why am I your best student? He goes, because you just do what I tell you to do. I'm like, and why is that being a good student? I'm not like getting A's here. I'm just doing what you say. And it didn't make any sense to me. So I asked him, like, what is the point of hiring a coach to solicit advice and then not do what the coach says? He goes, well, you'd be surprised. But here you're the anomaly. You're not the rule. Because he's been coaching for a number of years with a number of different clients. He says sometimes people will take a year to implement one thing that I asked him to do. And I was just shaking my head. What a waste of time and money. And he smiled. And he didn't have the same judging tone. And he said, wouldn't that drive you crazy? And he goes, no, because I know how difficult it is to make a big decision. And so then I started to understand that from him, that it was rare for a person to be able to just listen and do without questioning, without the knowing of the whys and all the hows and the step-by-step instruction. He would just say, you need to go and do public speaking. And then I just volunteered. I didn't ask him, like, what's the big deal? What's the concept? How do you know this will work? What evidence do you have? Who else have you coached to do public speaking? And this is where I find myself a lot with people that I coach. I'll say, you need to do this. And like, why? How? They want evidence. They want proof. And so I really am now starting to understand that, oh my gosh, he's been talking about this for years with me. That people just don't want to move. They like talking about change, but they don't change.
I echo this sentiment in such a big way, especially with respect to a lot of the executives that we coach. They want so much that work. They want so much that position. And I'll go back and I'll check their LinkedIn before a call, or I'll, ask to see something and they're like, oh, I didn't get around to it. It's like, well, don't you want this position? This is yours. You are in this opportunity. Like, if you do not go for it, somebody else will. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. The idea of having a coaching relationship means you need to be coachable, which means you are putting your trust, your money, your time into this person. They're not like waiting around to save their best idea, right? Like, they're giving you their best idea every time. It's not like, whoops, so let me like bring this one out of the leftover bin. You know, they're coming to you every time with something that is going to address your urgency. And when you were going through this process, because it sounds to me like you were working with him, for about 20 years?
13 years.
13 years. So that's a long time.
Every single week for 13 years is a long time.
Wow. 13 years. Amazing. How did you decide that he was the one, right? I mean, how many did you talk to? Were you kicking tires for a long time? What was that selection process like? Because as a point of reference, and you may have heard me say this before because I still think it's mind-boggling, the coaching industry right now is at like a growth rate of 7% annually. It's out of control. I think it's approximated at like 21 billion. And there are 9.1 million coaches of various coaching strains out there on LinkedIn. So if you're somebody who's looking for an executive coach, a business coach, a sales coach, a communications coach, a leadership coach, whatever, how do you go through that level of volume and make a decision?
My answer would not surprise you, Lauren. The day I heard the term business coach was the day I decided to hire one. I was having lunch with a friend. He looked like he was in pretty good spirits. I asked him, what's going on with your life? If he told me I went on a carnival or cruise, I would have gone on a cruise. Whatever he said, he's like, I hired a business coach. I'm like, who is it? Can I have their number? He gave it to me. I went home, talked to my wife. I said, I'm going to call this guy. And she goes, okay. I called him. He came, and I did zero vetting. I did zero shopping around. I met with him that first time. He helped me from making that business decision, that partnership. And he gave me the terms. They were a little funny to me because I'd been used to buying things in units of time, and he didn't sell time in a way. He said, you basically need to work with me for a couple of months, and I'm going to charge you this amount per month, whether you meet me or not. I remember discussing it with my wife. We kind of had some like, what? This is kind of weird. What if we go out of town? And he says, you're going to have to make a decision, right? Because he wasn't dealing with any of my questions. He just wasn't having it. He's like, you want to hire me or not? That's up to you. He didn't say it like that, but he's just basically, Chris, I don't really get into this. You either hire me or you don't. And at that time, it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. You know, it was like a few $1,000s. Okay, let's go. I'm there from spending zero, not even thinking about it, to less than a week, I've already hired my first business coach, and we just keep working together. And I remember being kind of excited talking to my older brother after just that first meeting. And my older brother's a computer science software developer, super intelligent guy. I'm like, oh, I hired a business coach. He's like, who's this person? Where did he go to school? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't ask. What has he done? What are his credentials? Who are his clients? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, before you get too excited, you might want to look into that. And so my brother has a very analytical mind, and he's asking me all these questions. I'm like, it didn't occur to me. I'm not even that curious. I'm just going to go for it. And in case you're thinking, Chris, you're just some weirdo, this is an anomaly, maybe, but I also hired my personal trainer, coach, the first person I talked to that I wanted to work with, and I didn't vet anything. Whatever the plan was, I'm just going to do it.
Okay. I hear you.
Yes.
You didn't have a friend. I mean, you got the first one through a referral, right?
Yes.
And so I'm curious, have you hired a new business coach since this time? Is it still a one and done?
It's one and done. It's 13 years in. And, you know, again, to be consistent, one day I asked Keir, I want to work with a therapist. And he goes, what for? I'm like, yeah, I need to learn how to be a better father and a parent. He goes, great, here's the person. I just hired that person. I've worked with that person, and I've never worked with another person. It's the same, and you're going to see this consistent theme. I ask for help. Somebody says, use this. I just do it. And you'll notice that this is a pretty big difference to how normal folk work, right? They're like, what are the credentials? Let me read this. Let me think about it. And I think all that time is time you waste. You're out there shopping for the perfect solution. And when you find it, you'll think this is not the perfect solution. And you'll keep thinking, oh, I want something else. This is not. And you just go from thing to thing and you don't really make a lot of progress. I'm the same way when it comes to the restaurant. My wife's like, what are we going to order? I'm like, whatever. Oh, you don't know what you ordered? I just saw this. I'm just going to order this. It's just one meal. I don't want to spend more calories.
So you are an anomaly. But at the same time, I mean, you have people that are pitching you all the time. You don't take everybody who comes to you and you pitch them first, and they pitch you and you're like, okay, one and done. You're probably way more discerning than that on the other end. Yes?
Yeah,
no?
but that's a difference. There's a difference there. When somebody's selling me something that I didn't want or ask for, that's a total different situation. But when I'm looking for something, I'm like, I want that pair of pants, and I focus, and I want that car. I'm just gonna do that. I don't need to like ask a lot of questions. I just don't work that way.
And that sure-footedness comes from your own internal what? Like, what gives you that permission? Because I don't know about you, but I work with a lot of people and they deliberate. OMG. They want to know, can I guarantee it? Is it perfect? What if this happens? What if that happens? So how is it that you have, or like you said, is this just a genetic anomaly? Like you're just born like with a very, very keen laser precision decision-making, capability? Or is this something that you, if you were coaching somebody to select a coach, would be able to say, there's a process here?
I guess there's a lot of confirmation bias here, Lauren, because even going to art school, my boss at that time told me to go to Art Center. I'm like, okay. I don't even know where Art Center is. He said it's somewhere in LA. I'm like, oh yeah, it could be the worst school in the world. But I said, I'm going to go to Art Center. I started telling people, I'm just going to go to Art Center. I don't know the tuition. I don't know the program, the curriculum. I know nothing except for Art Center, LA. Right? And so I tell my parents who start doing research.
And I'm like, totally, this is like, I'm talking to like the like one of people and how they make decisions. I thought I was fast, but you are really like Johnny on the spot.
I don't know. I'm going to do that. And then I go to Art Center. Before I go to Art Center, I go to City College, and they're like, where do you want to go? I just write down Art Center. I've never visited the campus. I've not looked at the catalogs. I know nothing, Lauren. All I know is my former boss said, go to Art Center. I'm like, okay. I remember this, and I'll tell you this. I haven't told this story very often. My high school yearbook teacher, who also taught comm arts, Mr. DeVita, I had him for comm arts as a freshman. And a lot of people are like, oh, you should become a graphic designer. I'm like, no, those are losers. They're going to just be broke. Like, don't even insult me, bro. I'm going to be rich and, I'll do the regular stuff. And then I in my junior year, I went back in and I took yearbook because that fascinated me for some reason. Didn't know anything about desktop publishing or typesetting or photography or journalism. But I'm like, let me just take this class. It seems kind of fun. And I remember when I was applying to schools, I eventually told him that I'm going to go to Art Center. He goes, oh my God, Chris, if you can get an Art Center, that'd be great. Also having realized I was turned down by the 3 schools that I applied to. I was rejected by UCLA. I was rejected by UC San Diego and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And it's just because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I know what he was thinking. You didn't get into any of these other schools that are not even focused on design. And you're telling me, and I didn't know at the time, you're going to get into one of the top design schools in the country? And he's like, if you can get there, he didn't want to rain on my parade, but if you can get there, that's going to be really good for you. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go there. And this is just my life. So everything is just like, I make a decision, I'm going to go. If I get in the car, the kids are always like, where are we going to go? I'm like, wherever we go. We don't have to sit here and have a whole discussion about it. And we went back before the pandemic, back when I had a bigger office and we were making commercials for a living. One of the rules of Lunch Club is like Fight Club. Do not ask Lunch Club where Lunch Club goes. You get in the car or you don't. Do not complain about where Lunch Club goes. Do not second guess it. We just get in the car and we all say something and I just drive and we wind up there. Because we had this whole thing where everybody's like, oh, so what are you going to need? I'm thinking about this. And they have this 10, 15-minute discussion. I'm like, yo, guys, You just wasted 15 minutes of your lunch. I'd rather eat lunch and have a conversation than sitting around here. So we would ban every single person who would question it. And it came down to 3 people, and we'd go to lunch and we'd have a great time. And it was just easy. There's bigger things to do here.
There is. And time is precious, of course. It's non-refundable as well.
Yes.
So my question to you is, was Keir worth it? Was it worth, I mean, it sounds like you didn't really take a risk because you didn't, have too much concern about making a bad decision. You're just like, okay. And
it always works out.
I actually have mad respect for it because it says to me that there's a certain level of you're going to work with what you have. You have an opportunity to work with a business coach. He wasn't, a basketball player, and he was in the scope of what you were looking for. You were going to work with what you had and make it happen, regardless of who, when, how, why, whatever. But was it worth it? Was it worth your time? Was it worth your money? Was it worth your vulnerability? Was it worth asking for help? Was it worth it? People want to know, is coaching really worth it?
I want to clarify something. I was even looking for a coach. Like I told you, the first time I heard the term business coach was at lunch. And that's when I'm like, oh, maybe I should do this. I mean, Lauren, let's put it this way, okay? Let's say you're having lunch with somebody and it's an older person and they're full of life. Their vitality scores off the charts and their skin looks amazing and they're like crystal clear in their thinking. And you're like, friend, what are you doing differently that I'm not doing right now? How are you living this amazing life? They're like, well, I went into the mountains. I talked to this guru who told me to eat this berry. You're like, where's this mountain? Who's this guru? What's the berry? I'm just going to go there. Now, other people are like, what kind of berry? What science studies? Who's this guru? And is he a scam artist? Is she a scam artist? They go through all this whole process. Like, this person at lunch was glowing to me. He said, I hired a business coach, double my business. I'm like, I'm in. You had me at double my business. So then I just hired. I didn't even have the intention to hire anybody because I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting.
Okay.
The biggest, hardest thing.
So you were attracted. So here you go, right?
Yeah.
If you are seeking a coach, help me here if I get off the rails. Okay. If you are seeking a coach, in your case, what happened was this person was an embodiment of the experience with this coach. Not just like cha-ching, but he was radiant. He was happy. He was feeling a sense of promise, hope, excitement, all those things. And so maybe that happened with your trainer. Maybe that happened with your therapist. You are living through the experience of somebody else's successful experience. Is that fair?
Possibly. I mean, you remember that movie When Harry Met Sally? And Meg Ryan says, women fake orgasms all the time. And Billy Crystal's like, no, I don't believe it. And she's like, no. And she starts moaning and everybody's like, and then the funny line is, I'll have what she's having.
What she's having.
I didn't even know what she's having, but I'm going to have it. And, we talk about this all the time. When somebody achieves something that you want, put your brain together, reverse engineer it because, as Jim Rohn said, success leaves clues. Just go pick up the clues. And this is what boggles my mind and why I think there's a lot of room for coaches to be successful, because I guess what you or I or others do intuitively, people struggle with. And we can get into that. But to answer your other question is, was it worth it? So I'll tell you if it's worth it or not in a story. So that first year in which we worked together, Keir had me run through what I thought was a pretty refined process of how we pitch. Because at this point, I think we're doing about $2.5 million every year. For a couple of years, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. For a kid from Vietnam living in Silicon Valley who thought the most I'd ever make was $100,000 a year, bringing in $2.2 million was like, this is beyond. I already bought my first house and I'm not even 5 years out of school, and this is wonderful. And I described to him how we pitch new business. And then he tells me in so many words, kiddo, you're doing this all wrong. How do you know what people want if you don't ask them? So this is a gigantic lesson in my life. And I thought, and I'll tell you this because I always laugh at my students when they pull the same maneuver that I used to pull, which is, Keir, I didn't know you could do this. I thought there was a rule that you can't literally ask people what they want. If you're in a relationship, especially if you're dating someone, you're supposed to intuitively know that they want that pair of shoes or that kind of dessert, because you're supposed to pay such careful attention. This is like a fallout or a byproduct of the romanticism. Like, you're supposed to just know things without words, right? Like, when I had a girlfriend, she's like, you're supposed to know these things. How am I supposed to know? Just tell me what you want. It's much easier if you just tell me. I can't ask them. I'm not some kind of cretin. I went to art school. I know how to do stuff. You telling me this whole time I could just ask people? And if I don't want to work with him, I can just say I don't feel comfortable. He goes, yes. And that was a ginormous paradigm shift for me. That I could just say what it is that I was thinking. And I'll tell you right now, Lauren, it created a lot of tension for my team. It created a lot of tension for the people who were on the call. But I was so comfortable in myself. I'm like, I don't care if you feel uncomfortable. In order for me to do my job, in order for us to win this, y'all have to just shut up. So I told my team, don't say any words. If you mess this up for me, I'm not going to have you on the call next time. Because you're uncomfortable with it doesn't mean I'm not. Or I am. And then we would tell clients, in order for us to really understand what it is you want, I'm going to have to ask you lots of questions. So this could take some time. And I even tell them, for some of you, it would be very uncomfortable because I'll just ask you very direct questions. At any point in which it feels too uncomfortable for you, let me know. So I prepare them. I'm priming them for what's about to happen. And then I ask question after question. And these are not like random kid questions. These are, when you say you want to totally go in a different direction than the previous 9 years of you doing this, tell me what you're thinking precisely, because all I can see is a slight change from what you did before. And they're like, you're right. When we say we want to totally refresh these are just words we use. And then they have to really think. And you hear that long period of silence. And what's kind of interesting is afterwards, people would say things like, we've never been asked these kinds of questions before. You made us really think. And here's the crazy thing, Lauren. We went from winning only 20% of the jobs to winning like 85% of the jobs. So our close rate quadrupled. Money was just falling on our face. And that year, we went from 2.2 million to 3.9 million, and we never looked back. So if you put that into like numbers here, so we increased our revenue by almost $2 million. But that knowledge that I gained from just a few coaching sessions with Keir would translate over the next 12 years. Right? Because the great thing about learning something is it's a tool. And you get to use it forever.
I mean, you could probably amortize that and go, oh, okay, over this period of time. I mean, you don't need to do that. Please don't. But my point is that that's the gift.
Yes.
Right? In that story, of course, you had to readjust. You had to, probably get back down to ground zero and then rebuild it, which, of course, took time and effort and probably a lot of retooling with your team. But say the least, right? But then look what happened. It set a new trajectory. And so it is a great story, and clearly it was worth it. And
wait, so I want to say something.
With that in mind, go ahead.
Are you going to ask another question?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to say something here. So to answer the original question is, was it worth it? So in my mind, Keir already paid for himself for the next 10 years. So I didn't really care what we did. We could talk about what's on TV for all I cared, because I'm a value buyer. I'm not a price buyer. Now, if I was a different person, I'm like, great. Next month, I don't need him. I'm going to let him go. I'm going to end this relationship. And that's not how I operate. I know some people do it this way. They're like, great. I got 2 months worth of coaching, a major breakthrough, and they just cut and they run. And Hormozi talks about this all the time. He goes, find something that works and then stop doing it. That's the surefire way to fail. Right? So here I am.
Exactly.
I've done this. I made a ton of money doing this, and I now have a new coach and mentor, and I'm just thrilled to be working with him. And of course, he teaches me other things, and they're not as financially profound as that thing. And here's the part that's going to burn a lot of people. And I need to say this. It took two coaching sessions. I didn't need a lot of step-by-step after that. So it's not, when you say you have to really work at it, no, I think you just do what they tell you to do. He said, ask questions. I'm like, how? He gave me 3 examples. Like, great. Next thing, I did it. It didn't work. I came back. I said, okay, so when I asked this, they said this. What am I supposed to say? You go, oh, you would say this instead. And I remember clearly I was a little pissed at that time, just a little bit, like 5%. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this before? I was just thinking that. I didn't say it. Now that I've been through some life experience, like, of course you didn't tell me that, because it's pretty intuitive that you would know to say that. It's not until you present yourself a new problem. And then from that point forward, I didn't need any more coaching for sales. I was doing it, and I was doing it well enough that I started to train and teach my team, and then they were doing it without me. So Keir's gift to me through our coaching was completely transferable to these other folk in my company. So I didn't even need to be on sales call anymore, unless the job was more than $500,000 or something. I'm like, don't call me, guys. You guys go win this work now. So it only takes 2 calls, and people are like, what? It takes you longer than 2 weeks to make a decision. In 2 weeks, I already hired somebody, learned something, adjusted, and was winning. So this is the miracle of coaching. People think it's this long, arduous process of like grinding through it. For the kind of mindset stuff, for the communication skills, it's not. Keir made 2 tweaks to what it is I was doing. And then you can become an NBA champion. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
So in today's world, maybe everyone else isn't, getting a hole in one, and
Right.
they're going through all these processes. They're in a different marketplace. This is not what it was 13 years ago when the market was flooded with all of these choices and people. And I'm not discounting anything that you're saying, Chris, about your ability to see through that and just take action, because taking action is one of the things that I respect about you in a huge, huge way. And it's something that people say about me. And I think I take that as a compliment, and I hope you get it, take it that
Absolutely.
way too.
Yes.
But there's also a lot of frauds out there. There's also a lot of scams out there. And I've heard it, you've heard it. Oh, you know what? I worked with this coach before, and I gave them all this money, and nothing happened. And one of the things that I really, really appreciated about what Keir said in some of the interviews was there was a lot of emphasis on what happens if you make a bad decision.
Yeah.
What happens if you make like the world's worst decision? I'm sure that there have been bad decisions.
Of course.
And so how, if you have chosen a coach, or if you've worked with a partner, a vendor, a team member, an employee, and it was quote unquote a bad decision, then what happens?
Well, first you have to have the clarity to know when to cut your losses. And you also have to have a huge degree of accountability that, did this fail because you didn't do it, or did this fail because you were given poor instructions? And I'm going to say, and I hate to say this, even the scammers out there, they're telling you what to do most of the time, and you're just not doing it. And you can't hire people to do push-ups for you. You've got to just do it. And if you've done it and you think, okay, this isn't working, this is a scammer, look, I want to talk about that too, by the way. But it's like most of the time it's because you don't do anything. You just don't do anything, okay? So let's say you do take accountability, you've done everything, and like, this isn't adding up. So let's just chalk this up as a learning experience in life. Cut your losses to say that this wasn't a failure. This is the tuition you pay for success. Next time your red flags go off, pay attention. Look at how they're marketing to you. Look at the promises they're making. Look at who they have that they're touting as success stories. Do they even look real? You can almost see in the offer, the proposal, that you just bought into a scam and you knew it. You were just lying to yourself. So let's talk a little bit about that, okay? And we've had to fire many vendors before. And looking back on it, the evidence was as clear as night and day. And we're not even talking about malicious people who are trying to scam you. We're just talking about underqualified people who you had the desire to get the job done was greater than your ability to make a rational decision. You were so desperate to at least just get one thing off your plate that you hired people that didn't have the qualifications, who could not do the job, who even said funny things, but you just were just shutting that down because I'd rather just put that fire out right now. What Keir told me was,
So all the evidence was there.
well, it was always there, and you knew it, but you didn't act on it because you chose to be blind to it. Keir's had many jobs in his life. He said, I used to be a lifeguard. I'm like, okay. He goes, you know, when people drown, they don't do rational things. And he's seen it so many times. They're literally 2 feet from the edge of the pool. And when they start to panic, they swim to the other side. And inevitably, they drown. So then he's got to jump in there. And he's like, he can see it. And he's like getting off he's like, this is what happens. So when you're in that desperate state, you don't make good decisions. So one of my core beliefs is try to be calm in situations where normal people would lose their mind. Stay rational. So the way that you do that is you expose yourself to increasing degrees of stress such that you condition your mind and your body to still be able to be calm and make clear decisions. People panic all the time. Okay.
So there's a lot of desperation.
Absolutely.
In regardless of what field you're in, especially in, I want to say, the job search, right? People start lowering their titles and lowering their compensation level because what they really want is taking so long that they default into reducing their standards. And then they get kind of screwed because then they're overqualified. So it's like, you thought that this was a good strategy because it would secure and alleviate some of that discomfort and pain of you being quote unquote unemployed or no longer working, but it kind of backfired, or you are in a role where you know it's going to be a toxic boss or some kind of sweatshop. When you said that all you really want to do is work for somebody who's a great leader and be a part of a culture.
Right.
And so how do you prevent the desperation as it's creeping up? Because if you're feeling desperate, it's hard to pull yourself into a calm state. And how does a coach perhaps help to quell that anxiety?
This one's a tough one, Lauren, because I'm not in this space. I've only worked for someone for a very short period of my life. Less than a year total of my entire life was working for other people. I've not had to make a resume to get a job in over 26 years or something like that. It's been a long time. But I do see
But you've
people...
been desperate before. We've all been desperate before. Have you ever been desperate before?
I don't think so. I mean, around women, yes, maybe, but not in work relations, you know. I don't... I'm trying to think
or to
if
make
I've
a
been
decision
desperate.
or do something rash or impulsive where you're doing it based off of what you just described. You want to get that done at the expense of doing, you know, something that might be more rational.
Yeah, I guess I didn't code that as desperation. It's just more like, this is annoying to me. I don't have the time to vet this properly. I would rather just pay, quite literally, and make the mistake through money. And I'm okay with that. And so I'm trading my time for money. So we hire people sometimes that aren't qualified, but I'm like, I'll let them go. We'll waste a few $1,000, 10,000, 15. I don't care. We'll just hire another person. We'll just keep doing this until we hire the right people. And so I think that's part of entrepreneurship from my point of view, that it's messy, it's sloppy, and you waste a lot of money. And that's part of the game that you signed up for. Because if I sat down and interviewed every single person, went through all the forms, I wouldn't have any brain or creative power left to do anything that was going to actually move the needle for me. So I usually empower my team to hire folks. Like, I'll give you an example right now. And this is an evolution for me. My head of business said, hey, one of our employees needs a new laptop. Is it okay if we get this computer? Do you care? Do you want to weigh in on this? The old me would be like, I'm going to order a computer. I'm going to spec the processor and for the job and what they need. I'm like, I don't care. Maybe they over or under spec their laptop, and that'll just be their choice. And if we waste a few $1,000, so be it. You know, I want to be in a place where I'm financially so solvent that I'm not going to fret over, okay, so we lost $10,000. It's a lot of money, but compared to the big picture, we got to keep moving forward. We're not going to beat ourselves up over this. And so that's how I look at it. But getting back to your whole thing, like, when you're in a desperate state of mind, you don't make good decisions anymore. And I'm sorry, but I don't have a lot of experiences in my life where I'm so desperate, where I'm like, let me try this thing. But here's the thing. The job market is funky as heck right now, isn't it? We know that tech companies have laid off a lot of people. We're in a recession. We've been in one. They don't call it that, but we've been in a recession for a while. And there's a lot of uncertainty about workspace environments, productivity. There's too many variables out there. Interest rates are up. Inflation is up because we're paying for 2.5 years of keeping people afloat, which is necessary. But now the chickens have come home to roost, or whatever the expression is, right? And so now we gotta pay for all that stuff. And so there's going to be a long period of a slow recovery out of this financial pit that we're in. So what does that mean? It means the kinds of jobs are going to get harder to get. They're going to be much stricter because now they're not throwing away money just to hire you to fill a seat. So the cream will rise to the top. Now, if you're such a person, and I'm probably going to differ from where you're going to be on this, Lauren, which is, I believe in my talent. Let's just say everything failed for me. I'm going to go out and get a job, and I haven't had one in a gazillion years. So people are like, you haven't worked in X number of years? I'm like, yeah. And you're a failed entrepreneur? I guess. We don't want to hire you. I'm like, okay. I might get desperate at that point because I gotta pay the bills and all. I might just take a job that is not right. But here's where I'm going to be different than most people. I'm going to go in and kick so much ass that eventually they're going to promote me to wherever I need to be and pay me what I'm worth. So maybe that's what some of your clients are going through, where they think that, or maybe they're just so desperate that I'll just take anything at this point.
A lot of our clients, but your depiction is still relevant, right? Yeah. You just don't want to get to that phase is really the bottom line,
right.
I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
One of the last things I want to talk about is a quote that I think was probably one of my favorites from Keir, yes. I think applies to coaching. I think applies to so many things. He says, you get the world you see. And I would love to hear your take on what Keir meant by that and how you are able to either apply it to your life, apply it to coaching, apply it to even the job market that you just talked about, right? You don't have to be in the space to know what's happening in the world, right? You did a beautiful job of sharing at least 90% of the variables right there. And so we can get really focused on that because we can see that, or we can see something else. And so help us out here.
Okay. I can't speak to exactly Keir's state of mind and what he meant by that, but I know what my interpretation of that is, and it aligns with my worldview. So there is something like objective science or data, and there's subjective interpretation. And what we commonly think of as objective information is mostly subjective interpretation. Somebody cuts you off on the freeway. It's like, oh, that a-hole doesn't respect people, is cruel, selfish, what an egocentric, whatever. No, somebody just changed lanes. You sit down for like a gourmet steak, and you're like, this is the best prime rib I've ever had with double glazed smoked this and aged 6 months. No, it's a dead animal. And so if you are into what Marcus Aurelius talks about in his stoicism or being a stoic, it's like you try to see things for the way they are versus the way that you want to see them. Mm-hmm. But human beings are meaning-making machines. We want to have meaning to everything. And we form belief systems all around the things that are inexplainable or unexplainable. And we start to tell ourselves this story enough times that we start to believe this is actually fact and it's true. And so constantly I'm trying to practice this level of mindfulness where I pay attention to my thoughts and feelings from a third point of view. And I try to see myself as a witness. And from what people tell me, it's very similar to meditation, but I don't meditate at all, so I have no idea. So when I feel like, oh, I'm starting to get upset over this, and I just snap out of myself, it's like, wait, what's going on? What has happened here? What's transpired? Like, and then I ask myself, how do I want to respond? Like, is the data creating this, or is it my interpretation of this? And take a breath, calm down. What's going on? Regulate the emotions, and then respond in a way that's most productive for you and the other person. And I've had a lot of practice dealing with this because I've had bad employees before, and I've had people who've said things that they should not say to their boss or to a vendor that I'm like, okay, I could explode here, but I'm not. And I'm going to draw a boundary, and I'm going to make a decision, and I'm going to move on. Right? I do have some hot button things that I'm still working through in terms of, like, if you start to challenge me here, I'm going to react emotionally. I'm trying to work through that. And so what we're talking about here is if you can see the world objectively, you'll see for what it is, and it's just a random a sequence of things that are happening, and you ascribe meaning to them. So if you're going to ascribe meaning to them, try not to write a negative story. Try to write a positive story. So when you're hit with wave after wave of challenges and obstacle, you might respond like, "Why me? Why has God forsaken me? Why is the universe pitted against me? Why am I so cursed in life?" That could be one thing. A different interpretation was, there's something much better for me after I get through all these challenges, because these challenges make me stronger. And I don't want to live a life of easy challenges. I want to be tempered like steel so that I can have that strength to get through the dark days. So when I lose money, or when somebody cheats me out of money, and when I say cheat, it's like they set up an unfair business deal, I don't say like, "God, they're such evil people, and I'm such a sucker. I don't beat myself up over this." The narrative I tell myself is, "I'm glad you revealed your true face to me at this point in time, so I know who to count on my list of people I trust with my life, and then people I need to keep at arm's distance away from me. And I'm glad." And I told my wife this. She goes, "Honey, you expose yourself to so many people who take advantage of you." I said, I need this data, honey." She goes, "What do you mean?" So she can't process this, right? Her way of working is be careful, keep everyone at an arm's distance, and so no one gets into the inner circle because we don't want to be hurt. My whole thing is let all of them through, and the ones that are good, I'm watching, I'm paying attention to all the time. And I'm constantly, this is going to be scary for a lot of people, I move people into different categories pretty quickly. I'm like, "You're here, you're here, you're here." And so the inner circle is relatively small, and the outer circle is very clear, like, "I don't want to have anything to do with you because you've shown me now that you want to take advantage." And then I turned to her, I said, "Isn't it much better for me to discover who people are at a level in which the stakes are so low, relatively speaking, versus someone who has access to all of our banking account information, or when there's really something that's on the line that's going to be catastrophic for us to lose?" And then she's like, "Oh, that's a different perspective." So what was Keir's quote again? Can you say it?
Yes, you get the world you see.
So there you are. You get the world that you see.
I want you to know, Christo, that assigned or unassigned, you've been my coach for at least 5 years. I am just truly, you taught me how to sell without selling. You taught me the difference between cost, price, and value. You have inspired me to jump off a lot of cliffs as well. But mostly, what you've taught me to do and continue to inspire me to do is to serve, and to serve people in a way that is going to be able to teach them something that they could live for the rest of their life and pass on and have exponential impact on either their business, their organization, their family, their dignity, their self-respect, their pocketbook, all of those things. And I had the great honor of meeting you last year in London, and I love being a member of your pro community. You're definitely like one of my quantum peeps. Like, that's what I call you. You're like a quantum peep for me. You've changed so many people. And I want to just sign off here and ask you, because I won't have you go through all the signature questions. I just want to know, out of this episode, if somebody is looking for a coach, if somebody is thinking to themselves, is it worth it? I need a guarantee. What if I make a bad decision? Any of those questions, is there a Post-it that you would just suggest that they put on their goddamn desktop to help them either through it, make a decision, do something with that? What would, it's like, what would Beyonce do? What would Christo do?
You want a very short version, or you want a complete answer to this question?
I want your short version.
Okay, let me think about this. Okay, there's a quote in here. I don't know who I'm quoting here, so you have to help me find it after the fact or some research.
I will.
And I heard Errol Garrison say this, and I love things that repeat. Okay, so the Post-it note would say, "If nothing changes, nothing changes."
Changes. Yes. Yes.
That's it.
Christo, we'll make sure that all the links, the quotes, and I'll also include a couple of your YouTube videos with the interviews with Keir as a way to continue to memorialize him, because Through him, he gave us you, and through you, you've given us so much. So thank you for everything that you do. I just adore you with all my heart.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.